Sermon of the Week, Wagon Train, based on the book Deuteronomy. Wagons, ho! The loud call awakened John from a sound sleep. He rubbed his eyes and saw that his brother James was not in his usual sleeping place. He must already be outside. He stretched and then slowly crawled out of the wagon. The sun was just edging over the horizon, but there was a lot of hustle and bustle. He found James hitching the two horses to the wagon and said, "What's all a hurry?" "Indians." "What Indians?" John asked. His brother did not reply, but kept hitching up the horses. "What Indians?" John repeated. "Apache, over that rise to the north." John heard a grainy voice reply. He recognized it as the wagon train scout, Caleb. "Got to get a move on, son." John stared north and saw the Kansas prairie rising gradually to the north over what he surmised was a 2-mile span. But he saw nothing but prairie grass. However, he knew that Caleb was a very reliable scout and the train leader. Ward had full trust in him. He thus began packing up the wagon as fast as he could. Stories of Indian attacks were rampant in the West, but he had never seen an Indian since he and his brother John had left St. Louis a month earlier. He wasn't sure he wanted to see one today either. Two brothers were now ready, and they hopped up on the wagon and eased it into the line of 12 wagons and slowly cruised westward. When you are born, your initial reaction is to cry, and cry loudly. Sometimes you have to be stimulated to do so with a slap on the rear end. Sometimes the cold or the bright lights bring on the cry. But one thing is true: if you are to survive, your first act will be to cry, and cry loudly. Your journey is unknown to you, but you are in it. You may spend the first few days in a hospital or a warm home. Maybe you'll spend it in a jungle. Maybe you'll have nice parents, or maybe you won't. The first few days you will spend much of your waking time crying. I often wonder if it is the result of us actually knowing what a miserable world we've been placed in. Why don't we spend our time smiling and laughing? It may be a reflection of God's distaste for what His perfect world has become. I hope to ask Him someday. Eventually, eating takes over from crying, but you soon learn how to get what you want. Just let out a few loud cries, and lo and behold, more food comes rolling your way. Your life now moves along, and soon you are in school, which can last many years. Your life is molded first by your parents, then your friends and teachers. You eventually choose a vocation which can vary from teacher to preacher to farmer to factory worker to politician to whatever. The choices are infinite, but eventually you'll come to some decision on the matter and begin your efforts in or out of school to succeed at your choice. At some point in the first 20 years of our lives, most of our parents decide to move and do so. Most of these moves are not too traumatic, but some of them are. The move may be triggered by a new job, or if a parent is in the armed forces, it may be required. Some may have financial reverses or windfalls, or just want to relocate to a nicer climate. The most traumatic moves are those mitigated by war. If your country is losing a war, then you may be forced to immigrate to another country to survive. There were 500,000 Jews in Germany at the beginning of World War II. Half of them migrated to America. The other half did not or could not migrate, and everyone knows how that story ended. In the modern era, political strife seems to cause the most family movement. Refugees abound on a global scale today, more so than at any time in human history. The reason for all this movement is unclear. At no time in Earth's history has there been so much wealth and technology, so much abundance, yet people cannot get along. The idea has become the norm. If you don't agree with what I think or believe, you had better move along, pal. Democracy is defined as a system of government by the whole population. America and other countries still practice this form of government, but many countries in the world do not. The reasons cited vary from economic to religious to we just don't want to. Thus our world spins along in a quagmire of humanity, always filled with strife, poverty, and tragedy. Our Bible is filled with countless stories of people not getting along. the world population of 7 billion on a relatively small planet may now be contributing to the constant unrest of its inhabitants. But Genesis 4 tells us that it only took a world population of 4 to produce the same strife and violence we see today. The reason certainly couldn't be from overpopulation. But unto Cain and to his offering he, the Lord, had no respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. Genesis 4:5. Just because his brother was favored, he became angry enough to commit the first of billions of murders committed by humankind. We are not told anything of Cain and Abel's relationship prior to this incident. Maybe they were already at odds with one another. I expect so. Maybe their parents already were showing favoritism to Abel, or maybe Abel was a bully. But one thing we are told is that Cain became mad enough at his brother to take his brother's life. Is there any justifiable cause for taking another's life? The Bible says flat out, no. Exodus 20:13. In fact, you cannot even hire a hitman such as the mob is purported to do to have someone killed. Cursed is he that taketh reward to slay an innocent person. Deuteronomy 27:25. So what causes all the unrest, strife, and movement in our world? Why are so few humans happy and content? Maybe our Bible contains some clues. Deuteronomy is book number 5 in your Bible. The word Deuteronomy means second law. This book consists of 3 long dissertations from Moses, the leader of the Hebrew nation. Historically, it fits into the time frame of the latter part of the Exodus. Moses, who was also a murderer, by the way, led Israel out of Egypt and tromped around the Sinai Peninsula to the northeast of Egypt for 40 years with a wagon train of over 1 million people. They were on their way to a new and better land promised by their leader Moses, who said he got his information straight from the mouth of God himself. The first dissertation in Deuteronomy consists of a historical account of those 40 years of travel. The second part discusses mankind's need for belief in Almighty God. The third portion speaks of the need for a repentant attitude even if Israel were to lose their promised land at a later time. In fact, no adult male who began the 40-year trek of the Hebrew wagon train from Egypt would be allowed to enter it. Not even their leader Moses was allowed to enter and enjoy the land of milk and honey. Hydrogen is the first element of the chemical table, now consisting of over 100 elements. It is a mass of 1, but has a second stable isotope with a mass of 2. It is called deuterium. Standard hydrogen is stable and abundant on this earth. It, along with oxygen, forms water, essential to our life. But the H2 deuterium, or heavy hydrogen, is a component of the nuclear hydrogen bomb. The Israel wagon train was like the standard hydrogen molecule, but when you added God to them, they had the power equivalent to a nuclear bomb. Witness how they systematically conquered city after city after city, and eventually all of Canaan. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. As our wagon train moved out and headed west, there was an air of tension in everyone. As they moved along with as much speed as a wagon train can, everyone kept staring at the ridge to the north, but no Indians were sighted. After about 20 miles, all could see a few lights on the horizon, and Ward Bond, the wagon train master, urged everyone to pick up the pace. This they did, and within about a half hour they were at a cattle camp. Everyone was relieved, and the wagons were circled together, and everyone went about preparing supper and doing the necessary chores. After finishing eating, James and John sat around their campfire to unwind. They now felt relatively safe. Soon a cowboy passed by and asked if he could sit a while. The boys said sure, and after a bit the boys began to quiz him about his job in the region. Finally the question came up. Sure, we see Indians all the time. What kind? Oh, Apache mostly. Aren't they dangerous? Aren't you scared? No, this camp is full of cowboys and every one of them can shoot. So no trouble at all, James said. Oh, there's an occasional missing calf, but this camp is as safe as anywhere in Kansas. And we always have a couple of hired riflemen around. Indians don't attack here, and if they did, well, where do cattle go from here, James asked. They move east from camp to camp, town to town, all the way to Kansas City. From there they move 'em all over the east, the cowboy said, slapping a mosquito. How does one go about getting such a job? James said, warming to an idea. Can you ride? Sure can. Can you shoot? Won a contest in my county fair. Well, all you'd have to do, James, is it. Yes, go over to the camp, headquarters, tent in the morning, and they'll sign you up. Always need more good men, the cowboy said, staring into the fire. He slowly got up and saluted and headed toward his tent. James, are you crazy? John said, knowing what was going through his brother's mind. Look, it's a great life, exciting, lots of travel, and above all, it's safe. These cowboys are well protected. You heard him. James, we've come over 500 miles, and we've decided to go together to California. There's gold and houses and land and women, everything you could want. Don't you remember the night we decided to do this? You can't just throw all this away, John said, exasperated. I think I'm going to stay here, James said matter-of-factly. John's face turned red as a beet even in the dark. He threw up his hands and said, Okay, do what you want, but I'm going on. You should stay here with me. Those Indians are a real danger. Come with me in the morning. Maybe down the line the road will be safe, and then we can head west. Maybe a year or two, James said. No, I'm going ahead. We decided to go west to the land of promise, and I'm not stopping for anything, John said. The two got ready for bed in silence, but it was a long time before either fell into dreamland. In another time and place, Israel had marched 40 years on a quest for a new land. Actually, it was an old land. You will remember Abraham journeyed from Ur of the Chaldees to Canaan in 1921 B.C., a journey of 500 miles. For perspective, Noah's flood was in 2348 B.C., and Noah died in 1998 B.C., 2 years before Abraham was born. Abraham then occupied Canaan for some 300 years until Joseph and then Jacob landed in Egypt in 1706 B.C. Israel then left Egypt in 1491 B.C. and by 1451 B.C. were on the Canaan border. The actual distance from Egypt to Jericho, where the Israelites eventually entered Canaan, is 350 miles. Even if their wagon train moved only 10 miles a day, it would have taken only 35 to 40 days, not 40 years, to travel that distance. But as history dictates, Israel, with detour after detour, circled and circled the desert endlessly. When the wagon train finally reached their goal in 1451 B.C., Moses sensed serious apprehension in the members of his wagon train. To attempt to alleviate this, he sent spies into Canaan to scout out the country. Numbers 13 states that 12 were sent, one from each tribe, so off they went into the unknown. Caleb was the representative spy from the tribe of Judah, the largest tribe. He and the other 11 spent 40 days spying and exploring their promised land. When they returned, they gave him mixed report. We came unto the land whither thou sentest us, and surely it floweth with milk and honey. Numbers 13:27. We will not be able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than thee. Numbers 13:31. And there we saw giants, the son of Anak, which comes of giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers. Numbers 13:33. Caleb the spy from the tribe of Judah gave the only positive report. Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. Numbers 13:30. No doubt Caleb pointed to the 1,000,000-man wagon train as he spoke. But the voices of the 11 drowned out the voice of one, and all that congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. Numbers 14:1. And how did Moses react? Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces. Numbers 14:5. What does it take for a human being to believe in the Lord? Adam and Eve had everything anyone could possibly want, including daily visits from the Lord, the Creator and King of all the universe. Yet they chose to believe in a talking snake. Curiosity? I don't know, but I want to ask him. Cain had everything as well, including being able to draw from the experience of his parents, yet he flew off the handle at a minor inconvenience. Noah was the 10th patriarch of humanity and carried with him an oral, if not written, history of the deterioration of his world for some 1,656 years, and only 8 of some 10 billion believed in their Creator. Israel spent some 400 years in Egyptian exile. Despite 10 vile plagues, the Egyptians chose to continue to believe in their gods of stone. Israel either believed for a time or just wanted to escape the plagues. In any event, whenever their wagon train had trouble, the Lord bailed them out. The Lord's presence was confirmed for the full 40 years by a cloud, which at night became a heat source in the form of a fiery pillar. Their hunger was alleviated every day by a shower of bagels called manna. When they got sick of bagels, God flew in a massive flock of quail. When they were thirsty, Moses found wells in solid rock. The story goes on and on and on for 40 years. Now they stand on the edge of regaining everything and more. And 11 of the 12 scouts shake with fear and trepidation. If God led them through all of this, could he not wipe out a few small armies as they advanced? The Canaanites believed. As you will remember in a previous sermon, Balak believed and feared God so much he paid God's prophet Balaam to curse Israel. Israel had already wiped out the kingdoms of Edom and Moab, portions of modern Jordan, to get where they were. It is estimated they had taken 60 cities. How could the report of a few giants put so much fear in them? I don't know, but it did. So how is it with you today? You came into this world by the miracle of birth. You were helpless, but God provided for you in one way or another. You grew into an adult with immense levels of talent, and the majority used at least one of those talents to live and thrive and become a success. Through the miracle of love, most met a helpmate, and together you constructed a wonderful life. All have had trials of one type or another, but as you look back at your own history, the odds of it actually having happened are astronomical. Yet all of your history did happen because God sustained you. Take some of your free time and contemplate what I just said. You will come to the conclusion that you could have not done it alone, and that God, often with the use of his many human tools, got you where you are today, and will get you to wherever you're going tomorrow. Well, how did our little Kansas wagon train turn out? It happens that James did not stay the course. He did not believe and joined the cowboy camp despite the pleadings of his brother John. John did stay the course and arrived in California the following spring. He settled down in the magical city of San Francisco and became a successful banker in the West Coast's largest city. James struggled along as a cowboy for several years, but never made any headway, nor did he find any gold. One day, as he was resting in his dusty tent, he heard the sound of horses followed by the sound of war whoops. They grew louder and louder and finally brought him out of his dazed condition. He grabbed his rifle and stepped from his tent. The sight he saw turned his blood cold. Some 400 Indian warriors on horseback were attacking the cowboy camp, now a settlement. He got off a few shots, but suddenly felt a sting in his left chest. He looked down to see the feathers of an arrow protruding from his chest. His mouth became dry as he watched the carnage before him, and he slumped to the ground in a shiver. His last vision was that of his brother John and their covered wagon, waving goodbye to him, tears in both their eyes. My little story may be fictional, but in 1878, the little town of Oberlin, Kansas, was attacked by Indians, and 30 settlers were killed. This was the last Indian raid ever in the state of Kansas. Once again, study your history, study your family's history, study other people's history, study world history, study biblical history. The only conclusion you can come to is that God is real. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life.